if you make it a priority to have a work-life balance, then you can make it happen.
On the Experts Connect podcast, we have thought-provoking conversations with top-performing experts on topics that matter to you. With Experts Connect, you'll uncover fascinating facts and gain the necessary skills you'll need to improve all aspects of your life. Hello. Hi, Neha. How are you doing?
I'm good, Katie, and how are you?
I'm good, thank you. So, Neha Naik, can you tell us a bit about your background?
Sure. Yes, I would love to. So first of all, thank you for having me here. Really excited. So I started my entrepreneurship journey about 7 years ago. A little bit about my background. I have a husband, two toddlers, and I live in Houston, Texas. And I currently own 4 companies.
4 companies. Wow. So you're quite fitting to talk to us about female entrepreneurship. So tell me, Neha, how did you decide to become an entrepreneur?
Yes. So my entrepreneurship journey started because I was stuck in a job where it was politically like a toxic environment, unfortunately. And I knew I was good at what I do. This was, and I was working with a recruiting agency. And the culture was just not what I wanted, right? And without saying anything bad about anybody, it's just I was very unhappy. I was dreading Sunday nights because I was like, oh my gosh, I have to go to work tomorrow. It was also like an hour and 10-minute commute each way. That didn't help. My husband and I were going to start, having a family. And so we were starting to plan. And I was like, I don't want to be miserable when I'm pregnant. I don't want to be like in hell. So I just decided to one day walk in and give in my 2-week notice. And I came home and I told my husband, I'm like, I'm not doing this anymore. And he was like, I'm glad you did that. Like, I'm glad you decided that. And I just started an LLC that night. So my first company is a recruiting agency. And what I specialize in is helping startups scale. So I get a lot of companies from California, New York, Austin, even, and they're like, oh, we're looking for, like to scale our startup and, increase people in our company. So that's kind of where I started.
Wonderful. And you mentioned 4 companies though, but what was your motivation to start all 4? Because you mentioned what? What about the other 3?
Yes. So the recruiting company was because I was really passionate about helping companies grow, and I didn't want to work with big companies because there's a lot of red tape and bureaucracy, and startup is where we're heading right now, right? So I really wanted to focus on that. The second company I started was the sleep consulting company, which is a pediatric sleep consultancy. And what I do is I help parents around the globe to instill healthy sleep hygiene in their kids, because obviously as a mom and a working mom, I know how important it is to get a good night rest. And so my goal is to like shatter that taboo of, oh, when you're a mom, everything comes second and your child comes first, where a lot of the cultures, unfortunately, they believe that, right? So it's like, once you have the baby, who cares about the mom? It's all about the baby. Where I always say, like, self-care for moms is really important, regardless of if you're working or not, right? Just because you're a stay-at-home mom doesn't mean that you don't need sleep at night. So I really want to shatter those norms that may exist in some cultures and just say, no, we need to instill healthy sleep hygiene in kids. And it's not just about the moms, it also helps kids with boundaries, setting boundaries for them, and make that they know, like my 4-year-old and my 15-month-old, they go to bed at 7 and 7:30, and they don't wake up till the next morning. And they've done that since they were 5 months old. So I've never had an issue. I am able to connect with my husband. We watch movies on the weekends. We can have date nights. So it's nice to have that me time. And, you're not just a mom, but you're also a woman, you're a wife, you're a friend, you're a daughter. And I feel like sometimes we get really sucked into being a mom where we just forget these other roles. And then you start seeing these other relationships falling apart, which I don't want that to happen, right? So I started that. And then I started Triad Partners, which is a data analytics company. And what we do is we help companies kind of envision their data dashboards, right? So streamlining processes, streamlining their revenues. We want to see like, where are you wasting money? Where can you save money? And put together that data for them, right? So it's a data analytics company. We just do a lot of stuff with data dashboards, Power BI, Power Apps, and all that stuff. And then the fourth company I started is Creative Arc, which is a marketing agency. And I work specifically with physicians and private practices, and I help them with their operations and also their marketing needs. So one thing I know about doctors is, as hard of a profession it is and as respectful of a profession it is very time consuming with all the paperwork. And I feel like a lot of doctors need help with like marketing, and so that's where I come in, kind of solving that problem. And then this isn't a company, but I have a course for moms who want to start their entrepreneurship journey. And moms, we don't need encouragement, we don't need the hoopla, we just need actual step-by-step process on how to do it. So my goal is to, if you are unhappy like I was at my 9 to 5, that hopefully by doing this course you can leave your 9 to 5 and sign on a client in 12 weeks or less.
Wow, you're so inspiring, and your companies are so diverse. They span different sectors. Very impressive.
Thank you, I appreciate that.
You're welcome. So tell me, you have two toddlers and you have so many companies. What do you love about being a mom boss?
Yes, I love that I define my own hours. I love that I have an amazing team of other moms that I've hired for my companies that basically help me stay on top of things. So I obviously couldn't do this all by myself. Like, you definitely need a good team of people when you are in such diverse areas and diverse niches, right? And I also love that when my kid is sick, I can just say, my son is sick. I'm not going to be online for 2 days, right? And take care of him or my daughter. Or if there's a Thanksgiving play, I don't have to ask anybody's permission. I just say, hey, my son's performing in a Thanksgiving play. I'm gone from 11 to 1. Like, I'll talk to you guys later. So I'm really happy that I get to set my work hours. And I'm really also happy that my kids see me as somebody who is defining kind of the future for them. So I definitely want my son and my daughter to know that anything is possible and you can be a mom and you can do these other things, because I don't ever want them to grow up thinking any less of women and just respect women in general. So I'm a big believer in that. And so the fact that I can be that role model for them, it's really important to me.
Beautiful. And tell me, because you've been giving us hints as to what's your day like, but can you zoom into how you're able to manage your life around your family?
Yes, I have a very fun day. Probably not the right word. So I'm a big believer in time management and priorities, right? And really kind of figuring out what's top priority and what's low priority and what's going to have the biggest impact on my business, right? So my day starts at 4:30 in the morning. I go to the gym from Monday to Friday from 5 to 6, because again, self-care is important. Being healthy is important. If you have all the money in the world, but you're stuck to the hospital bed, none of it matters, right? So I do gym, I come home, I get my kids breakfast ready. They usually wake up at 6:30, 6:45. I get them ready for, daycare. And then they usually leave the house by 8:15, 8:30. And then I really focus on like, okay, what are the top 3 things I need to do for each company that are going to have the biggest impact for each of those companies, right? Whether it's getting out a client proposal, whether it's getting out an invoice, whether it's planning for what, Q2 looks like. And that's where I'm doing this week, is like Q2 is right around the corner here. So just really planning with my team on what Q2 initiatives look like. Where can we change things, right? I'm a big believer in always changing things up as things move. So because the minute you're static as an entrepreneur, you're not going to be successful. So just always doing market research, always figuring out like, what else can I do to add value to my customer, right? And that's really important to me. So I really focus on those 3 things. And then it's some of the stuff like, oh, I need to get this email out, or I need to send this, leave a voicemail, or, oh, there's a birthday party this weekend, I need to order a gift for the birthday party that I'm going to. And then I usually take a 30 to 45-minute lunch break, where I spend time with my daughter. She's home. We have a nanny for her. So she's home, and, I'll spend time with her. And then again, from 12 to 4, again, going back to like whatever is left, talking to my team, getting things ready for the next day, getting the high, like things that have a deadline, moving fast. I'm also a big believer in project management tools like Asana, and that keeps me on top of everything, because then I know like if I give myself a deadline, I'm more likely to, hold myself accountable for it and get it done. So I'm a really big believer in that. But I think ultimately, right, what it really boils down to is time management. So
Yeah.
I hear a lot of people say, well, how do you have time? How do you have time for this, right? Well, it's about making time for what's important in your life. So to me, that's obviously my family and my businesses. So then 4 o'clock, my son comes home, and then from 4 to 7:30, my husband and I, no laptops, no phones. It's all about the kids until they go to bed. And then we usually eat dinner, and then we like watch a movie or we talk. And then sometimes like for 30 or 45 minutes a night, if I'm like, oh, I was supposed to send this email out, I'll just draft it and get it ready for next day. So I start, and then I go to sleep pretty early because I wake up early. So I need the sleep.
Yeah, so I'm gathering that setting priorities and time management are really key to managing your business around your family, right?
Yep.
Yeah, so many women, not only those who have their own businesses, but those who also work in industry or in education, wherever, they often struggle with work and family. Do you believe that work-life balance exists? Is it a myth? Is it reality? What's your position on this?
Yes, that's a really good question, right? So it exists if you want it to exist. If you make it a priority to have a work-life balance, then you can make it happen, right? So like we have some rules as a couple, as parents that we don't break. Like weekends are all about the kids, and if we have to work on weekends, then we at least make sure, like for example, we do it when they go to sleep or during their nap time or when they're at a play date or something like that, right? So we again, when they're with us on weekends, it's our time with them. So it's all about the quality time. So you really have to define what a happy work-life balance looks like to you. And everybody's in different situations, right? So I know people who have to work a lot to make ends meet, unfortunately. I know people who don't have to work a lot, but they still do because that's just their personality, right? If you're happy with your defined work-life balance, then that's great, right? There's no right or wrong. It nowhere there's a manual that says you have to spend X number of hours, with your kids, right? But it's really to me about the quality of time that you spend with them over the quantity, right? So as long as you say from 4 to 7 every day, I'm not going to touch my laptop or touch my phone, and it's all going to be about the kids. I think to me and my family that works, right? Whereas somebody else could say, well, I only need an hour with my kids, and that's okay. It again really depends. I will say though, in the society, we take pride in, oh, I worked so late and I woke up so early to work. And I think some of those things do need to be broken. And I think it is important to say, no, there's self-care, there's exercising, there is family. And so no matter how much time you allocate to those each day, you have to allocate some time to them.
I wholeheartedly agree with you. But Neha, sometimes, starting a business, and if you don't necessarily have a team, right, you end up giving more than what you bargained for to the startup, right? I want to know when you started each of your four businesses, now that you have four up and running, did you ever feel overwhelmed while running these businesses? And then when you started to have kids, how did you manage this and how did you feel while running all these businesses?
Yep, that's a really good point. So, of course, I felt overwhelmed when I started any of them, right? Because you don't want to fail. Your instinct is like, what is this going to work? Every person who starts a business feels this, regardless of how awesome the idea is, right? You always have that self-doubt kind of nagging at you in the back, right? And I would say I did work my butt off to establish my businesses initially, but again, it was not at the expense of my kids and my husband. So if I had to work, I would make sure again I was up late working, right? And it didn't impact like what my kids saw me, because I also don't want my kids to see me struggle. And I don't want them to be like, well, every time I see her, she's always on her laptop or she's always on her phone. And I'm a big believer in that if you want something to happen, you will find time for it, right? Besides the conventional, what your rule is, or your role is as a mother or a wife, right? So there were, of course, there were months of me, even like after my husband and I had dinner together, instead of watching Netflix, I would just sit down and like, what can I do next, right? So
Yeah.
there's going to be compromises that you have to make. And that's for everything, right? So even when you're pregnant, for example, you can't drink, you can't party, you can't run. Like anytime you take on something that's going to change your life, there's going to be compromises, right? And it's the same with business. So if you think that, oh, like I'm just going to do whatever and I don't have to work hard for it, you're never going to succeed. But you have to define, when can I work to where it's not impacting these other areas of my life that are also equally important. And that's what I would tell people, right? I didn't have a team until honestly last year. Probably in May is when I hired. But one of the things I did hire right away is a virtual assistant. So when I started getting clients, at least 3, I was like, okay, I know it's an expense, but it's an investment, because if I'm here and I'm overwhelmed looking at my emails, like I need someone to help me classify them, filter them. So I'm not like waking up in the morning like, oh my gosh, I have 300 emails. And then all of a sudden you're in that slump. So know when to hire people out. A lot of people, a lot of women or business owners don't know that. They don't know when to delegate. And they always think of it, oh my gosh, it's an expense. But the thing is, you have to spend money to make money. And that's the reality of it. And once you know that, then things become a little bit smoother, because you're like, oh, like I can take vacation with my kids because I have my team doing this for me on the back end, right? And even when you're starting out, right, you're like, hey, I have 3 clients. I need a virtual assistant to just help me 5 or 10 hours a week and then help me out when I'm on vacation so that I'm not waking up on Monday morning to 5,000 emails. Do it, right? Because yes, it's money, but at the same time, you're not going to grow unless you spend money.
Yeah, I agree with you 100%. And you're very inspiring, and many women want to be like you and have their own businesses, but they just don't have that confidence to just get up and do it. How
Yeah.
are you helping them to gain this confidence to start their own business?
Yeah, that's a fantastic question. So if somebody would have told me 7, 8 years ago I would be here, I would have laughed at you. I would have been like, absolutely not, never going to be an entrepreneur. So I think everybody starts off with low confidence. Everybody starts off with self-doubt.
Yeah.
It protects us, right? Because it prevents us from jumping off a cliff, right? And that's kind of innate to our human psyche. But at the same time, what I did is take it one day at a time. So define what you want to do, what your client is. And the way I help women specifically is I have a Facebook group, a community. It's called Successful CEO Moms, where I provide actual guidance, actual tips. Like I'll tell you, oh my gosh, I had the worst client call 30 minutes ago, and here's what happened. And my goal is to like teach you my failures and mistakes. So when you watch it, you are inspired to say, oh, she has 4 businesses, but look, she had a really crappy client call, or she had a horrible day, because as much as I'm a CEO of 4 companies, I'm a human and I'm a mother first. And that is really what defines me, right? All these other things is something that I had to work hard at. Those weren't given to me at birth. So if you really focus on how you connect with your ideal client and how you connect with, other women entrepreneurs and build that community, that is what's going to be really, really important here, and not so much the other frivolous parts. So that's the first way, is that community. And the second way is the course that I just launched, right? So it has 4 modules, and it's called From Day Job to Successful CEO Dream Life. And so basically we're just, helping women build their dream businesses from their kitchen table, because it's possible. And I've seen it happen not only to myself, but other women. So that's kind of where I come in.
Great. And I just want you to take me through. So you mentioned that sometimes you have bad client calls. So how do you deal with these challenges, Neha?
So initially, I would take them really personally. Like immediately, if I had somebody who didn't sign up for my service or buy something from me, I was like, oh, I suck. Like my company sucks. Like it was very personal. And then what I started doing was I just one day when I have my intake calls, and after the client said no, and I sent an email and I said, hey, could you just give me some feedback on why you don't want to move forward with me? I would just love to know, because I am a new business owner. I was very transparent, and she was so nice, and she was like, it's not you, like it was something about the time zone that was not working for them. And so that one email changed my perspective, because I said, it's not always going to be about you when people reject you. There's other factors, like there's pricing, there's your services, like, and they may work well with somebody else. And then from that moment, I said, not all clients are going to come to me, right? You don't want that. Like nobody has time for that. So if I had 1,000 clients for each businesses, I would probably die, because it'd be like, okay, this is too much. So my goal is to actually form relationships with clients that I can work with long term, and I have a healthy client relationship that where they can refer me to their friends and families, right? So it's not really about the quantity of clients, but the quality. And once you focus on the quality, that's when you start getting clients who believe in your purpose as an entrepreneur. So you really want people that align with your purpose, right? If they don't align with your purpose, even if they sign on with you, they're likely not going to stick around. So now your customer acquisition costs go up just to get that customer, but they're not going to like be there to make up for it, right? And you're not just going to get a good ROI from them, and they're not going to get a good ROI from you. So every time I have a bad negative client experience, I just say, okay, well, they weren't meant for me, and they're opening up space on my calendar for my future ideal client. And that's okay, right? But it takes time to develop that mindset. That's not something that happened to me like overnight, right? Like it took me years to say, okay, how do I develop this? But it's all about working on it, working on it, working on it, right? So if you stop working on it, that's when you're like, okay, like if you take it really personally and then you go in this like rabbit hole of, oh, like my company sucks, like blah, blah. But network with your ideal client when you're first starting out. Just say, hey, I want to talk to you for 10 minutes. Like, can you tell me what you're struggling with? Listen to their pain points. It's all about listening. It's about solving their problem and then really figuring out like how you come into that puzzle piece and how you complete that puzzle by giving them a solution that works.
I really love it because that's basically like you're applying this creative thinking or design thinking mindset to your entrepreneurship journey. That's awesome. Because in design thinking, we're always involving the customer at every stage of the process. So that's impressive.
Thank
And
you.
you're welcome. And tell me, Neha, what are some of the other lessons you've learned on your mom boss journey?
Yes. So don't fear failure. Failure will actually make you really strong as an entrepreneur. So really welcome it. I always like, it's funny because I did a live on this not too long ago, but I used to be really scared of failure, and it would kind of make me like, oh my gosh, like self doubt, right? And I realized like, no, it's totally okay to fail, right? You're gonna make mistakes, you're gonna fail. Don't be afraid of it. Like, just take it as a learning experience. And then number two is just start. Like, whether you have an idea that's really rough, and I think a lot of women or moms, they have an idea, they want to do so much, but for some reason, there's that disconnect between having an idea and doing something about it. And so I always tell people like, just start something simple. Take a piece of paper, write down what your logo should look like, write down what the name of your company looks like, write down what your ideal client looks like. Just start. Once you start having those thoughts and they start, getting in your brain when you're sleeping at night or when you're driving to pick up your kids, that's really what's going to give you momentum, right? And it doesn't have to be a really long time. It can just be like maybe 10 or 15 minutes each day or something like that. But really, those 10 or 15 minutes each day over the course of a month or two add up, right? And so now you have like an actual idea that you can execute on. So I always say just start, and don't think like, oh, well, I'll do it later, or I'll do it when my kids are this years old. And we always get into that trap because we're like, oh, we'll do it when they're older, we'll do it. And it's like, no, like you can always start very small scale. You don't even have to like have 100 clients, but just start getting out there, start having those networking calls, start putting your ideas on a paper, and then, just start executing them.
Yeah, I agree. And what would you say to women who are struggling with limiting beliefs? How can they overcome it?
Yes, that's a really good question. So I'm a really big believer in every time you have a limiting belief, like defining why you have that belief, right? So every time we have a thought, there's a reason for that thought, whether it's you want to eat ice cream, right? And you're craving sugar or whatever it is, there's always a reason behind your thoughts. So every time you have a limiting belief, think about why you're having it, right? So if you're having self-doubt, is it because you failed in the past and like the idea of failure scares you? And then once you define the reason behind it, also define what it will take to overcome it. Like, do you need to talk to a business coach? Do you need to be with, networking with people who are in the same niche as you and just learn from them maybe, or get a certification or anything like that, right? Sharpen up your skills. Once you define the reason behind those limiting beliefs, that's really when you start to see the breakthrough, right? So limiting beliefs is one thing, but if you don't know why you're having them and do like a little self-discovery and self-research, you're never going to get over them. Because we just usually just say, oh, like I can't, but it's like, well, why not? And so I always drill that with, women entrepreneurs that talk to me like, why can't you? Like, Why is it like, well, I don't have the resources. Okay, what resources do you need? Let's write them down, right? Well, these 3 things are not expensive. This is something you can do for free. And they're like, oh yeah, I didn't think about it that way. And then it's like, oh, we've just changed the train track path now, right? To go from something very linear to like, I can do it and I will do it. And whatever beliefs I was having, I was likely overthinking them. So a lot of it's defining what your limiting belief is and then just figuring out how to address it.
Very empowering. Love it, love it, love it. And tell me now, what are your key elements for a business to become successful?
Yep. I would say market research is number one. Always figure out what your competitor's doing. I used to shy away from competition because to me it was like, oh my gosh, their website's fantastic and their Facebook's fantastic and mine sucks. But I learned so much from my competition. I'm even friends with some of my competitors because we always bounce ideas off of each other. And I take it in a very kind of a learning manner and not so much like, oh, we're competitors, right? Yes, we're competitors, but we can learn from each other. And it's good to have competition. It basically means that there's a need for the service or product that you're offering, right? So start with that element, like that thinking, right? So market research, competitor research, getting to know your competitors in the field. The other thing I would say is like being able to define your goals on a short-term basis. So like I always define my goals on a monthly basis. I'm moving more towards the quarterly basis now because, as things stabilize, you can kind of start forecasting, but really figure out like, okay, what do expenses look like? What does the cash flow look like? And also like how many clients do you want to close? Like, what is your vision? Start visualizing having successful conversations with clients. I'm a big believer in visualization because then you kind of suppress your negative thoughts when you visualize things, right? So start envisioning things like that. And then once you start having those goals and you write them down, then you're like, oh, I want to sign up 10 clients next month. What can I do to make it happen, right? Defining, again, I mean, writing down the goal is great, but you have to define it because you can't just like write it on a sheet of paper. It's not like 10 clients aren't going to magically knock on my doorstep tomorrow. Like, what can I do to make it happen? What is another problem that I'm not solving? Or what is something else that I can provide, right? That's of value to them. So really defining that, right? And I think that's really important. And third thing is always delegate. So if you ever want to grow your business and you're at a point where you're overwhelmed, like I talked about, get a virtual assistant, get an online business manager, get somebody who understands you, who can work with you and streamline things for you.
Very good. Thank you. And would you say that one has to define their unique value of their business?
Yes, not just the unique value, but the purpose and their why. So Simon Sinek, obviously we all know about him. He's multiple TED Talks. He has a book on defining your why. And I am really a big believer in if you don't know your why, if you know your what, which is your service, and you know your how, which is how you're going to deliver it. But if you don't know your why, you're never going to be able to connect with your ideal client. So every time I have a call with a client, whichever field, whichever company, I always ask them what their problem or issue is that I can help with. And then I always say, well, here's how I can help you. And here's why I can help you, right? Because I've been there. I've seen the struggles of parents or recruiting, like companies, like whatever it is, right? Change the scenario up. But the thing is, unless you know your why and you define it, you're not going to be able to solve people's problems. So it's extremely important to know that. And then of course, when you have your why, then you kind of figure out like your mission, your vision, and then your values, right? What are the values you stand by? And again, it's good to write them down, but you have to live them. Like if you believe in integrity, please live them. If you believe in punctuality, please don't show up 10 minutes late and reschedule client meetings. Like walk the walk and talk the talk, because otherwise your values mean nothing.
Yes, walk the walk and talk the talk. I just want to dance right now. How can people reach you, Neha?
So the best way to find me is my Facebook page. Also, I'm gonna send you a link. So it's www.nehanaik.com, and you can kind of see all my businesses and everything. You can also join my Facebook group, which is Successful CEO Moms. So find me, get on the community. I would love to like have people on lives and stuff like that as well. So that's how they can find me.
Thank you. And thank you so much, Neha, for sharing your experience with us. We really learned a lot on female entrepreneurship today. Thank you.
Thank you for having me, Katie, and thank you for everyone who's listening.
You're welcome. Cheers.
Cheers.
Thanks for tuning in on Experts Connect. Please head on over to teachsomebody.com and give us an applause. You may share your comments and ask your questions in the comment section. Please subscribe to us on YouTube as well as follow us on Spotify, Apple, and Google Podcasts. You can also follow me on Instagram at Davis-Owusu. Have a lovely rest of the week. Bye.